Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thanks, Jim.
Stewart, what kind of progress have they made on the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Well, it's probably something like 15% built right now. It will be 30% built by the end of 2020. That's what Ian Anderson, he's the CEO of the Trans Mountain Pipeline Company, said to media a couple of weeks ago. So it does seem to be very much on track for being complete by the end of 2022. It's about 30 months away.
Is BC still dragging its feet when it comes to local building permits?
When it comes to those little permits for different things that are under the purview of the BC Ministry of the Environment and other ministries, I haven't heard that this is a big issue. It was at one time. I think it was being used maybe deliberately, not necessarily with authorization of the government to sort of, slow down the project and make it more difficult to build. But it's actually been a couple of years. I think they have realized the legal obligations and also the reputational ones. If you have bureaucrats engaging in this kind of business for an approved project that's deemed to be in the national interest by a federal cabinet, then it's not a trivial thing to go around and do that kind of thing. You have to get serious if you want to be taken seriously. And I think there is some seriousness now.
Now, we've had how many court rulings in favor of the pipeline?
Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost track. I stopped counting at about 20. But yes, there have been a lot of challenges. There's a whole sort of challenge cottage industry out there, which in a way is good because it ensures that the things that do get built in Canada are the best they can be, in as much as they have survived the test of our court system, our independent judiciary. In a lot of countries, they don't have that independence, and they don't have processes that allow citizens to challenge things like pipeline projects. But we do have that in this country. And when you have judges coming back with rulings saying, you know what, this is really a project that has ticked all the boxes, very impressive work, and that's what they say in their rulings, and this happened in some of the most major rulings, then I think that's actually not a bad thing to add to our portfolio of what the finance people are calling ESG, environmental, social, and governance performance. No country is exceeding our performance in ESG right now, which is a good thing.
Stewart, how much of Canada's wealth depends on oil and gas, even though it's very slow and prices are low? Yeah,
that's a good question. There's always someone trying to, come out. There's different ways you can describe it. If you say, you just take, for example, the year 2016, they had 220,000 jobs just in the oil and gas sector in Canada, and probably another 380,000. So call that 600,000 jobs. That's 3% plus of all the jobs in Canada. And then you say, well, what work do all these workers do? What does it result in? Well, their earnings are more than $10 billion, $10.4 billion. So workers are going home, they're spending that money on the groceries and vacations and the mortgage and skates for the kids and all that stuff. And then you've got the other important part. I mean, we talk about energy transition as if there's a sort of idealized state that all we have to do is get away from oil and gas, and then Canada will have this wonderful future with clean energy. One of the things, and I'm all for clean energy, the thing that oil and gas does in our economy is it results in export income. And we use that income to buy stuff that we can't make ourselves. Like, we don't grow bananas or oranges. last time I looked, and we don't make iPhones. And there's all sorts of specialized equipment. We might maybe import it from Germany or Switzerland or Japan. I mean, there's these countries that really specialize in stuff that we need to have, or vaccines or blood products. We import like $5 billion a year, more than we make in terms of those medical needs. And where do we get the money for that? We get it from exports. So if you substitute those energy exports we have today, oil and gas, with ones that don't have the ability to be exported, then you're really not replacing, you're losing that income. So that's one of the reasons why it is so important to be investing in innovation in oil and gas. We know how reliable the hydrocarbon is as a source of energy for the things people like to do, but we also need to mitigate or reverse its negatives. And they're real negatives. I mean, no one's saying, oh, there's nothing wrong here. These are perfect. They're not perfect. They have negatives for sure. We don't need to debate that. The thing we do need to debate, though, because there seems to be this idea that there's no improving those products. It's impossible, which flies in the face of the truth, because we know that, for example, like if you went down and bought a Toyota Corolla today, 2020 model, you would be driving a car that is probably about 10% more efficient than the same model, a Toyota Corolla that you had bought in 2010. And that's because the energy efficiency is being improved. And that's not even counting improvements in the fuel, because we have laws in BC that require there to be a sort of green component of gasoline. So all these people saying, oh, we absolutely have to just stop using gas cars, they're just never going to be any good, they're awful, they can't be improved. It's actually not true. We're seeing steady improvement over time. And the more we invest in that, the closer we can get to goals. And I've calculated that we could probably, just by continuing with the kind of improvement into the next 30 years that we've done over the last 10 or 20, just that measurement I've done, we could probably get, at least 60% of the way just from that towards our climate goals for mid-century. So whenever you hear someone saying there's no way we can keep using oil and gas because it can't be improved, they're absolutely wrong about that.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Abin Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Abin's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abinresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, you sent me a nice graphic, a picture from Edmonton, from the Blackburn Creek Homeowners Association. Thank you, Trans Mountain Pipeline Workers, says the sign, for respecting our neighborhood. So it doesn't sound like the pipeline is a real neighborhood disruptor. Yeah,
well, at this point in time, especially on the West Coast, where the Trans Mountain Pipeline in particular, which is being expanded, a major $12 billion project under construction right now, it's been seen as this divisive thing. And people look at their friends, they're at a barbecue. So is this person for or again? But should I better not raise the topic? It could result in, someone starting to throw their steak or rolls around. It's been one of those hot topics. Socially, we sort of avoid it. You don't want to be on the wrong side of it with your neighbor or friend or something. But that's really just a Vancouver thing, because in the rest of the country, people appreciate that you need to have safe infrastructure in order to get things, and they especially appreciate that in Edmonton. And I noticed that sign. It was this neighborhood association. So I did drive around some of those neighborhoods in Edmonton in the last year when this was going on. And I took a look at what Trans Mountain was doing. So they have a refinery on the east side of the city. Not a refinery, pardon me, the pumping station. That's where it all starts, the Trans Mountain base. And the pipeline goes out from there. The existing one that goes to Burnaby, that starts from there. The new one, it starts from there. But because it's on the east side of the city, the far side from where Vancouver is, it has to go through the city to begin its journey across the prairies to Jasper and then through the mountains to the coast. And so that was where they started. I don't know why. I guess you start the beginning of the pipeline at the beginning of the project. Maybe that just makes sense. So anyways, they started building there before they started building in other places in the last year. And I went and looked. I mean, it was very tidy stuff. They had very clearly marked parking areas. They had signs from the contractors, all these code numbers, because there's so many little pieces to it. So they had to make sure people were driving to it. They had the mud, all the earth they were disturbing. It was all managed. They had, wooden pads, mats they put down. They had pretty clear signage about traffic flow. There wasn't any interruption. And I think because of that, and the fact that people in Edmonton are more likely to work in the energy sector, this is where we've got some major Canadian refineries, that, it's just sort of normal. So anyways, there's this sign that shows up at the Blackburn Creek community where they've said thank you to Trans Mountain pipeline workers for respecting our neighborhood. And, I think Trans Mountain clearly did a job in such a way that they earn that accolade from local residents. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar kind of approach in other areas. Whether we get the residents of Burnaby putting up signs like that when they've done, well, we'll see what happens.
Isn't the Trans Mountain Pipeline going to be one of the biggest municipal tax contributors in Burnaby?
Well, that's one thing. I think the current mayor and the recent past mayor have never liked to talk about that. But yeah, it's a huge economic driver. It, just by its existence there, it does generate those revenues. And then you have employment on top of that. And the fact that, hey, Burnaby, you're doing a lot to help out your country. Thank you. That's something that's meaningful, very meaningful.
I also have noticed along Burrard Inlet, they have special spill response ships now that they never used to have. Does that make the project safer?
Well, that investment was something that, to an extent, was voluntarily provided by the project. They also had, as time went on, had regulations that were created to ensure that, when I counted them up, I know there were at least 11 of the 150 or so conditions without which the pipeline would not be allowed to proceed. 11 of them that directly concerned the safety of the ocean as oil is transported across it, going out to the open Pacific. And that also included these requirements on setting up these bases. There's one at Nanaimo. There's one further to the south where they have spill response deployment. But they also have, let's not forget, the safety. I mean, by the time something's spilled, obviously that's because something's gone wrong. And yes, you do have to clean it up, but you don't want it to happen in the first place. I think what's even more important than the spill response, just in my opinion, is the measures they've taken to increase the safety before anything can happen in the first place. So instead of having one pilot, harbor pilot, to pilot the tanker ship through the harbor, they brought in a regimen of two pilots. One whose job was to look at the instruments, looking down to those screens in the bridge of the ship, and the other one to be the eyes on the water. What's going on? What are we seeing? Because, collisions and groundings are the two major issues that historically have been the cause of tanker issues. They don't just suddenly, split apart. They split apart because they've grounded, or they spill because they've collided with the ship and resulted in, something like that. So you want to put all of your efforts into avoiding, or most of it into avoiding those collisions. So they've done that. They have all kinds of procedures on the speed, the number of tugs, whether they are tied on, like tethered, During the passage, they have, 3 tugs during that critical point coming out of a broad inlet through the second Narrows Bridge up to the first Narrows. That's where you have a really intense amount of activity around one of those tanker ships. And I think they've done an excellent job in not only bringing in the rules, but also, communicating to people that, hey, look, this is happening. So you can easily find out information now. They've lifted the game considerably in that. So that's why I think when the pipeline is finished, it'll be one of the biggest non-events in history. It won't be this day when suddenly, everything changes. It'll be just incremental. People won't look out and say, wow, this is different. It's not going to look any different. It's just one tanker a day in a context where you've got so many other ships. I mean, if you stand, at a lookout at Stanley Park and spend a day there, you'll see a lot of ships come and go, all doing so safely. And one of those will be a tanker.
Yeah,
an oil tanker from Burnaby.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the website marinetraffic.com, you'll see hundreds of little dots out there across the BC coast. And I thought, if you add one more dot, would you notice?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to the Gulf of Mexico, you go to Singapore. If you have marine traffic or there's other apps like it, you zoom in there and look at just the oil tankers. You can usually deselect the yachts and the fishing boats. Just look at the tankers. It's stunning, the number of ships. Also, the English Channel, around the Rhine River, all of the oil and gas that is imported, that is used in Europe is imported. All of it. Most of it comes from Russia, the Middle East, some of it from Canada and the U.S., and they just have oil ships all over the place. So whenever I hear Europeans saying, oh, you Canadians wanting your oil ship, you're terrible, awful Canadians. Well, wait a minute. Look in your own backyard, guys. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of tankers at any given moment traversing your waterways. So we're talking about one ship here.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, have there been any studies or surveys or polls to find out what British Columbians think of natural resource development?
Well, I've seen a lot of polls over the years, and there was a recent one from Nanos Research. We talked about it at the resourceworks.com site on the news feed there. But I find that most of these surveys, if they ask a couple of the basic questions, they tend to get pretty similar answers, and I'm very confident over the years of looking at these about a couple of things. One of them is that Canadians are very strongly supportive of the natural resource economy. They're comfortable with it. Maybe it's because they have relatives or in their family history, they've had someone who's worked in it. They maybe have looked at the figures and the stats and seen it for themselves. But yeah. So I think there's this general agreement. It doesn't mean that the 80% of people who are in agreement with the natural resource economy and think it's a good thing for Canadians also think that, we don't care about the environment and, as long as we get a good, strong economy, it doesn't matter what we do to the water, the land, or the air, because you see in the same polls that people have very strong feelings about all of those things. So they want to have the proverbial environmental and economic balance. I mean, it's absolutely true. That's what we're all about. I think what you get, a couple of interesting things is, when it comes to the NIMBY factor, I mean, we were talking about that sign in Edmonton saying, hey, thanks Trans Mountain Pipeline workers for respecting our neighborhood. I mean, that's the opposite of NIMBY. That's YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. come and do your work because we know you're good at it. What we tend to get is more of the NIMBY factor when someone says, yeah, I support natural resources. Oh, but I don't want that thing near me. So I think that's always a complicating factor. So the sort of higher level idea versus what does it mean in my life today. Just one of those things. Right now we're in a BC provincial election campaign. It means that in every single riding across the country, there's going to be candidates, 2, 3, 4 candidates or more per riding who are out there looking for votes. They won't be knocking on doors the way they used to. Maybe they'll be coming up and, putting a pamphlet on your door handle, but they're not going to be there to chat, I don't think. I'm not sure what the rules are. Do you know, Jim? But I suspect there'd be a lot less candidate to voter direct personal interaction than non-pandemic year. And so the challenge of how do you communicate if you're running for office, I think is a really interesting one. They're going to have to get noticed. If you're already a known figure because you already hold a seat, or maybe you're some celebrity and you've decided to run for office and people know you because of that, you've got an advantage over those people who just, they've given up their regular thing. They're not really that known and they're out there trying to get noticed. It's tough for those people. But I think, having a little bit of a sense of how to talk to people is important. I think the number one thing is for anyone looking to do something like that is be prepared to get out of your filter bubble, because all of us have constructed, not all of us, most of us, I think nowadays have constructed a sort of bubble. We filter out the stuff we don't like to hear. If you get a bad feeling, I'm not following that show on Netflix because, I don't enjoy it. Well, maybe you don't enjoy getting certain news from some part of the world or about some topic. You want your news from here. You're in this bubble. Back in the day, you get your daily newspaper. There's 2 or 3 choices in a city. You could have, if you're in Vancouver, you could have the Sun or the Province. At one time, you could have the News Advertiser. You could have the Daily Columbian and New Westminster. You could have a few choices sort of narrowed over the years. But everyone was reading that, one of those. Everyone was looking at the same front pages. Everyone had a sort of agreed thing. Okay, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor today. That's a big story. Well, now, maybe there's a lot of people, if that happened, they wouldn't even be aware or care that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor because they're looking at something else. You can filter that out. So I think it's hard to get out of those filter bubbles, and that's making politics really difficult.
Is there a push to get rid of salmon farms in BC?
Well, not from the federal government, which has done 9 scientific studies looking at a topic that was brought forward by the Cohen Commission, looking at the fate of the sockeye salmon, the great iconic species that grows up many rivers. But to us, it's what it does coming up the Fraser and going, up through that whole river system that is just, a true BCer. It just their heart gets racing at the thought of it because it's such a special fish and part of our heritage and history. And of course, there's some big problems facing those runs now, and that's what the Cohen Commission was looking into. Ironically, it was struck at a time when there was a historic low return, but then while it was sitting, it was the biggest return of the sockeye ever in all history. At any rate, one of their findings was, if there proves to be, I'm not reciting it here, but this is as best I recall it, if it proves that there is scientific evidence that the Discovery Islands salmon farms that are in place, there's a number of them there, are affecting wild salmon swimming past, then we should be looking at relocating those salmon farms. And now, just in the last day or so, because there's a looming deadline, that's why we're hearing about this issue in the next day or two, I think. There's a deadline on this topic from 8 years ago. They're saying we've done 9 studies. We found no evidence that there's more than a minimal risk to salmon in the wild from these farms. And they've said, as a result of that, we're going to continue doing consultation work and make sure all the First Nations and everyone else who needs to get heard gets heard. And this is creating a bit of consternation amongst the anti-fish farm groups that have invested a lot of effort and money over the years to try to create a perception that isn't based on science, not real science. I mean, there's some pseudoscientists running out there who the media seem to have difficulty telling from real scientists and give them equal space, but there's no scientific evidence of these harms. And, you look at green industries that BC could grow, I would put salmon farming probably top 1 or 2 on the list of industries that we could create more jobs in right away if we wanted to. And yet it's being opposed by these interest groups. So let's hope that we get a good, firm resolve from the federal government on this topic.
How big of an employer of Aboriginal people are the salmon farms?
Well, there's probably at least 20 First Nations that have different types of agreements with the salmon farm companies, and there's probably, 2 or 3 large, significant salmon farm companies, and then quite a number of other ones, more niche ones, doing not Atlantic salmon, because that's the payday area. The Atlantic salmon grown in net pen cages in the sea is what results in the largest agricultural export in British Columbia. But you've got these other niches as well that are pretty cool. A lot of stuff, a lot of science being done. Really interesting when you get into it. And so, I think the future of this is likely to be that the governments that see the benefits for First Nations and the First Nations themselves that are investing in some cases in boats that come out and do the sea lice management. It is an issue. I mean, these are real issues. It doesn't mean that they're disaster issues. You've got some very good progress on that. I think the First Nations are starting to appreciate if they don't speak up for themselves, no one else will. And so they're becoming advocates. There's a conference coming up, Vancouver Island Indigenous Natural Resource Conference in October. They're going to do it virtually over a couple of weeks, different sessions, and salmon farming will be part of that. So I think there's kind of a new realization by these nations, often small, remote. They want to preserve their way of life, but they want to have a good way of life and a good income based on things that are realistic for them, that they want to, pursue things like forestry and salmon farming, because that's really where they can make those significant year-round incomes and jobs that support a family.
How important is salmon farming to BC's economy?
It is, it's the largest, most valuable agricultural export by, a country mile. And all of the salmon that are raised to be sold are pre-sold. They don't have to go out there and send a salesperson out to Asia or the States to flog that salmon. It's already been spoken for. And that's why I can say with such confidence that it's one of those industries that we could grow so easily, because there is an unmet demand for more of this healthy protein with omega-3. It's very good for brain development, for good health. People want it lean fish. People are watching their diets around the world, and they do want it.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His Twitter handle, @SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or the show, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.